guys, this episode is brought to you by our sponsor, ZDMS. ZDMS is built for dealerships ready to embrace change and unlock their full potential. Yep. As the industry evolves, outdated systems continue to hold dealers back with slow workflows, limited visibility, and operational inefficiencies. From multi-location management and streamlined workflows to real-time reporting and improved visibility across every department, ZDMS delivers a modern, scalable platform built to simplify operations, increase your efficiency, and support long-term dealership growth, allowing your team to spend less time managing software and more time driving results. Visit zdms.com, that's ZIIDMS.com today and schedule your demo. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dealership Fixit podcast. It is time for our pre-owned market update with Mr. Mike Murray from the National Powersport Auctions. And Mike is back with the latest data, and this one matters most because we are kind of at a turning point in the season. We're going to walk through the main numbers. We're going to compare them to where we were in April and talk about what every dealer needs to be doing right now with their used inventory sitting on their lot. Mike, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be here, Jacob. Always appreciate the opportunity to put some information out there, and hopefully you dealers are paying attention so that as the market continues to change, you are in the right spot in your wholesale inventory, and we'll get right into it.
I'm getting a lot of good feedback on this little series that we're doing here, by the way, Mike. Every time a new report comes out by NPA, we kind of go over the data. That's what we're going to do in this episode. Are you getting any feedback that dealers like what they're hearing and we're giving them the good info?
I have got some pretty good feedback. I love that you said that. Couple of local San Diego dealers that I see all the time commented that they appreciated it. We've got 14, 15, 16 territory sales manager across the country, and they're getting some feedback from the dealers they're visiting as well. I love that. And you dealers that are listening right now, if there's something you'd like to hear differently, if you're something you think is really good, when one of those NPA TSMs pops into your store to say, hey, give them some feedback or reach out to us directly.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Mike, let's set the table, man. Let's kind of get into it. April was strong, but the report flagged that we might have already kind of hit the seasonal high water mark in roughly March and April. Now that you have the May data in front of you, did that call hold up?
So, yes, April is in most cases looking like the top of the market. When we look at price to book in the major categories, definitely April was our high water mark. And May had some stuff as well. It tailed off a little bit. It kind of depends on the product category specifically, but overall, we did see that high point in April, and we're now seeing that slide into that what usually trough ends up being around August.
The August is the slide. Okay, yeah. One of the things that stood out to me was the strong year over year is still there, but it's kind of softening month to month. And I guess the thing that I want dealers to kind of understand right out of the gate is that two things can be true at the same time. I think that was your line in the last episode.
Oh,
The values are still way up. Yeah, the values are still way up versus last year, but the month to month momentum is starting to flatten. So maybe just walk us through how both of those can be true and why dealers need to pay attention to that trend.
So there's two things that are important in the data that we look at, and that is the actual average selling price and the price to book. And we as an industry have a little bit of a problem fixation with book values. No knock on our good friends at JD Power. Love what they're doing. It's a critical piece of all the finance industries, automotive, power sports, whatever. It gives us that kind of universal ballpark of what something's worth. But frequently the market changes quicker than they can update a printed value or even a website value sometimes. And so what the market's actually doing versus what the book, quote unquote, predicts or indicates it should do are typically pretty different. And, I'll pick on one thing specifically right now, is we're looking at, Harley-Davidson. We call it cruiser domestic, but for ease of conversation, we look at the price to book of Harley-Davidsons right now for the last couple of months, and we go, oh man, our price to book is actually lower for the last 5 months than it was for this time period last year. And then even the 5-year average, but we're looking at price to book, and that book value is, I'm not going to say arbitrary, but it's an estimated value or a prediction, so to speak. when we look at the actual dollar selling price of what Harley Davidsons are doing right now over the last 5 months, five completed months we have this year, the every single month the actual values are higher than prior years. So it's a little bit of a like, hey, oh no, Harleys aren't performing that well against book. Well, book may not be performing that well against the true market value because the actual price of Harley Davidsons has been elevated. Sometimes 5, 10 points above what it was prior year. So when we look at those two different values and the changes, it's important to understand that a book value is that guesstimate range. What's really happening in the market is that overall values are holding very similar, if not elevated from prior year, even if it may not feel like they're at where the book says they should be. I think JD Power currently is a little optimistic. I love it. I think that's not a bad thing. We just need to understand where the reality lies.
Yeah. Let's dive into that a little bit because I don't think we've had this discussion between you and I yet. But this is something that we go over all the time with my team at Moto Hunt is how important is the JD Power book value. And just like you said, there seems to be this fixation on those values, the rough, the clean, and the retail value. Whereas you have wholesale real-time data through your auctions, we have real-time market data through our tools looking at what everybody else is selling them for. And there does seem to always be this discrepancy. And the one thing that I'm reminded of is, well, why is the dealer so fixated on the JD Power book value? Is it because that's what the lenders use and most of our products are financed and the bank will only give a certain value to the JD Power or nothing else?
I think there's multiple scenarios here in my experience. I know there's a level of dealers that you guys are gonna love this, but they're just lazy. And they go, hey, here's what the book says. This must be what it's worth. I should be right. This should work. I should be good. This should be more. It should be less. Whatever it is, and they just should all over whatever the book says. That's one bracket that I would put some dealers in. I think there's other dealers that know to selectively look at the book value. Hey, if the book is in my favor while I'm working a trade-in deal and trying to create the value proposition, then great. If it's not in my value, I'm not going to talk about it. Or not in my favor, I'm not going to talk about it. And then I think there's dealers that just keep it, in a comparative situation that realize, hey, certain sport bikes, they got nothing in common with book value. They sell for $2,000, $3,000 over retail book value because that's what the market will bear right now. And I talk to dealers, frequently that are just like, I don't understand how you could get that financed. Well, those are the same dealers that have never tried. They've never put out a clean, last 2-3 year R6 and found that you can ask 14.9 for that bike, even though it's, $4,000 more than it sold for new. But somebody will show up and be like, take my money. And the R6 extreme, that's the easy extreme example, but there's other examples. If you have a clean, unique unit that sets itself apart in the market, then your price should be based on what the market will bear, and the book does not always know that. And the converse is true. We see certain makes and models that got nothing in common with the book the other direction, where they just aren't popular makes or models, or usually models. The makes are usually everyone's got something that's good, but some models just aren't popular. I mean, go back to the old Honda DN01s, right? Nobody could book had never had anything in common with those things until they quit making them, and then all of a sudden everybody wanted one. But again, my point exactly though is sometimes the book just can't keep up with what the actual market does, and so this live data feed and understanding that setting your expectations purely based on book will hurt you more often than it will help you.
That's so funny you brought up the DNO1. My old boss used to always say it stood for do not order one
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
because they never
Yeah.
sold.
Yeah.
Anyways, follow-up question to that. Where does Black Book fall into all this? I mean, we're partners with JD Power too. Obviously, they're the most effective, we'll call it, in the industry. It's the most widely used, I guess. But where does Black Book fall into some of these categories?
It's an additional data point. Actually, recently was on a meeting with someone that had worked with Black Book for a while, and they've got a great theory of trying to put a more frequent printing out there to keep this thing going. But sometimes it's still hard to get the actual seasonal trend going. Sometimes it's hard to actually see enough data historically to understand, hey, what am I looking at here? Is there enough depth of data to get the apples to apples? So I don't think they do a bad job, but I do think that it's an additional tool. And usually most finance companies, unfortunately, for Black Book, they like, hey, we're going to go with the JD Power. That's the industry standard of what we want to finance against. And I think that's what again leads dealers back to feeling like, I'm beholden to this JD Power number in some way, shape, or form. Yes, you may be on the retail side, understanding your finance requirements, your limitations, and things like that. But on the wholesale side, again, NPA value guide is the ultimate source of data to understand, hey, what's the real wholesale value of that unit? Because that's something that JD Power also cannot adjust for, miles and cleanliness or roughness or whatever happens to be. It's just a number, whether it's got 5,000 or 55,000 miles on it, they're going to show you the same number. Where when you jump into our data, you're obviously going to be able to look at some apples to apples and be like, hey, here's an older ZX6 that had 15,000 miles. Here's one with 25,000 miles. And you can see the price discrepancy between them. Goes, oh man, I've got a higher mileage one. I've got to adjust accordingly rather than just getting hung up on a number, which is all, the books can give you really.
Yeah, totally, totally. All right, kind of getting back to it. We kind of opened this up with the main numbers starting to soften. It's now June. We're in the summer months. Is this just kind of a normal summer softening because of the schedule that it so happened to fall on, or is there something different going on this year? Last episode we talked about the fuel prices being a little bit high. Is that have any effect into it? I mean, what's your overall take right now on what's happening in the market just in the season that we're at now?
Yep. So we're following the normal price curves. Generally speaking, we have this nice, on its side S curve that peaks typically around April, sometimes carries into May a little bit, but then always starts to head back down towards the trough, which is around August, again, depending on the product category. But for most product categories, it's around August. And then it starts flattening to going back up towards December and then January, and it happens all over again. And we have, 20 years worth of data to show that this is pretty regular. We, obviously some weird spikes during the COVID years and some things like that. But when you filter those out, like it's very predictable, very regular. At this point in time, we are at the beginning of June. We did have two auctions so far as at the time of this recording, and our June auctions were a little more. Prices were up a little higher than we anticipated, which says that dealers were more competitive. Dealers were feeling like they still wanted to go back to the well and get another dose of inventory to have on the floor. Where this time of year, we typically see them start to, I wouldn't say pump the brakes, but they at least let off the gas. Because anything you have now, you definitely want to be done by, August, September at the latest, depending on where you're at in the country. So seeing dealers be still somewhat aggressive here in the first week of June is a good indicator that the market and the wholesale power sport, the retail power sports business has some legs under it still. So I thought that was a great thing to look at my results from these first two auctions of June.
That's great. Yeah. And you've got so many different things to look at when it's by the dealers just reacting to the market right now. So obviously you're looking at the numbers in the
Yeah.
wholesale, but you also have this additional resource through your regional managers that you can kind of get a little bit of a tone, right? So what's the mood right now? Now we're in June, summer season, everything's still kind of accelerating a little bit. I mean, what are the dealers saying right now to your people?
The dealers that I've talked to firsthand and the ones that have shared some information through the team is pleasantly optimistic. I don't say surprising because I've never surprised when dealers do well. I think we have a tremendous industry, and I think we have a lot of really smart business guys who are passionate and do a good job. So I never want to say I'm surprised, but I am pleasantly, it's pleasant to see that we're doing as well as we are with so many cross-directional headwinds in the world, and we are in an optional industry. Nobody wakes up and says, I need a motorcycle, I need a side-by-side. And with all the other craziness and, if you believe all the headlines, there must be economic uncertainty, there must be all these other things happening. Yet this industry continues to just plod along and even show some bright spots and some growth. So that's the mood I get from most of the dealers. I think there are some places in the country that are maybe not experiencing that for one reason or another, but in most of the major metro areas, the dealers that I have talked with are doing at least as good as year over year, and some of them are doing better, either in margin or volume or both. And that's a good thing. That's a great indicator that the industry is still healthy and we're still cruising. The tariffs seem to be at bay for a moment. The one thing that I do get hit from a number of dealers is financing is just okay. They definitely are hoping that there's some financing incentives coming down from some of the OEs that they feel like that would change their world quite a bit. One dealer in particular I talked to, when he has, I think he said it was Kawasaki, and I know he has Kawasaki, so it could have been one of the brands, but I think it was when there's certain promos that come out, they literally will they'll go from a 5 or 10% increase to approvals, just because some of those promotional rates will put their potential buyers in the income to debt ratio and payment ratio to where it'll pencil out, and they can actually get it approved. So things like that are beneficial to the industry. So hopefully there's some of those coming down the line for everybody. But yeah, that's kind of the nutshell of what I've gotten from dealers here over the last couple of weeks.
That's awesome, man. Good to hear. Good to hear. All right, well let's do like we always do. Let's go into the numbers. So the first segment that I want to start out with is the on-road. We'll talk about the cruisers and the sports. So looking at your data that you sent me, thank you very much. By the way, the domestic cruisers are still leading, but they are cooling down. They were up 7.2% year over year in April, but the May sequential number actually went slightly negative at a minus 0.8%. So the strongest segment in the market just had its first down month against the prior 90 days. What does that tell you about what should a Harley heavy dealer do with that information?
The good news is that curve is absolutely normal. So predictable, normal, acceptable. There's no bad news in there. The only thing that a dealer needs to take away of that is realize, hey, we've seen the peak. And if I'm holding inventory more than 90 days and I decide I want to wholesale it, then I better hurry up and do that. The other thing is, if I'm holding inventory more than 90 or 120 days, I may be competing with other dealers in my area that have only had inventory for 30 days, and they easily could have bought that same bike at the auction for 10% less, 12% less, 8% less, some percentage less than what they may have paid at the peak, right? And that's an important part of this. It's not just what you're doing, and hey, I will still sell this, but understand you're competing with dealers who, if they're moving their inventory quickly, if they have aggressive turn times, and they're re-entering the market at the more current wholesale values, they will end up with a better value proposition on the market. And that's another little nod to, paying attention to your turn times, either discounting aggressively as you're getting towards the end, or rinsing out of it on the wholesale side to get back into the market at whatever the current values are there. And this is the time of year where holding it too long will cost you some money, whether it's retail, wholesale, can be competitive in the market because other dealers are buying in at the current values, which may be, again, 1,000 less than what you might have paid a couple months ago. Those are all things to be mindful of as you're managing your inventory there.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. One thing that caught my attention was the clean versus rough spread on the domestic. Um, in May, a clean domestic cruiser was averaging around 11,700, while a rough was around 7,500. I mean, that's a $4,000 plus spread in the same segment. I mean, talk about that gap a little bit. Why is it so wide right now? And what does that mean for a dealer that should be buying or taking one of these things in on trade?
I am really glad you jumped to these slides that I sent you, because these are some of my favorites, and this is one thing I love to share when we're at 20 groups or when I'm helping out other deals there, and that's what I was working on today for these. So this is the biggest illustration of the challenge with wholesale values and JD Power or Black Book or Kelly or whatever your flavor is. Um, the disparity between clean Harleys and rough Harleys is massive. Um, I can't tell you how many dealers are bringing me, 35, 45, 60,000 mile street glides, road kings, whatever. And they're not rough bikes, but they got miles on them. And they're still thinking, well, I'm probably only like $1,000 out. I got a priced 1,000 below book. It's like, no, 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 no. One of the rules of thumb that I kind of use, and it generally gets you in the right ballpark, is for every 10,000 miles over the first 10,000 miles, you probably should start backing off about $1,000 off the book value. So, a 40,000 mile Harley that might have a $10,000 book just for easy math. Well, there's 3 blocks of 10 over 10. I would probably start thinking that that's got to be $3,000 off book as a starting point, depending on how clean it is. Miles, this time of year, mileage has a greater impact on the value than it did 3 months ago. And that mileage and condition impact will continue to increase as we get into August and September. And we won't see that sort of diminish probably until we get into December and then into January, where dealers might get a little more aggressive and going, well, I can clean that up. That's a little bit of a project. I got a couple months before the season hits. But right now, nobody is looking to add projects to their service department, especially if it might be more than 60 days before it can get on the retail floor. That's the driver behind it. The reality is it's also very normal year over year. This year we have seen a bigger drop in the last 30 days than we did last year. Last year was a little more gradual drop, but this year we did see a big drop from April to May on those rougher bikes.
I like all the little sayings and the little mottos that you live by. So 10K over the first 10K is roughly
Yep.
$1,000 back. So great example, a great, I guess, rule of thumb, something to consider while you're looking at the JD Power values on this higher mileage bike. Tell me a little bit about the scoring. Let's go into that just once more, because when I always look at wholesale bikes that you have for sale, the biggest piece is the total CR score, the condition report. And it's always kind of been a rule of thumb that I was taught, being with your auctions for so long, that anything under 80 is maybe uh, I wouldn't say bad, but like questionable. Anything over 80 would be a pretty fairly clean bike. Where does the mileage factor come into that CR score?
So here's what's kind of interesting is the mileage has zero impact on the CR score. Um, a, a 10, 12 years ago, we had a one owner, 100,000 mile street glide, one owner. It was, he actually worked for a Harley store. It was his bike. He cared for it. I think it was an 80 or an 81 CR. It was garage kept. There was nothing wrong with it. And so the mileage does not impact the actual CR score. The CR score is purely based on the observable mechanical and physical and cosmetic condition of what we're looking at there. Mileage doesn't really play into that score at all, which is a thing to factor in here. You can have a 5 mile bike that's been wadded up, and guess what? It's going to be a 50 CR or whatever it's going to be. And you could have a 100,000 mile bike that manages to be an 82 CR because there's just no damage on it or very little damage on it. So it's a factor for dealers to look at, and that's why it's highlighted in all of our condition reports and all of our auction platforms. Hey, look, of course you got to know the miles. That's a big driver of the value of that bike, but you also got to know that condition report. And when you're actually previewing the auctions, you'll see two different CR scores. You'll see that holistic score, which might be a 78 or 79 or 82 or 86, and then you'll see two scores next to it, which will be a mechanical and a cosmetic score. And so we try to give you a high level snapshot view of what you're looking at there, going, hey, this bike could be an 82 and cosmetically it's an 86, but you know what? It's got a little oil leak and a few other little things. So mechanically it might be a 75. So you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do with that, because that overall score is an indicator of the overall quality, not necessarily, hey, it must be good. Couple examples I use all the time is I could have a perfect CVO, right? Screaming Eagle Road Glide Ultra that looks really good, but it has a dented tank, and that dent is huge, and that's a $3,000 tank. Well, it could still CR at like an 84 and 85 if everything else on it is perfect, but it needs a $3,000 tank or it's got to be fixed. And so it's like, wow, what's going on there? Well, that's just the only thing wrong with it. And I've seen some guys do that where they don't read the condition report or look at the pictures and go, oh, it's an 84 or 85. I'm going to buy it. It's got to be great. And generally speaking, it is, but every now and then it's possible for like a bike to be, 99% cosmetically perfect, but have some real bad booger that is really uncomfortable to fix. There could be a hole punched in the bat wing on the fairing on a street glide or something. And it's like, wow, that's a huge problem, but hey, that's the only thing wrong with it. So it could still have that score. So below that overall score is important. What I suggest to most dealers is like, you should probably set your line at about 77, maybe 78. and look at those things that are in that 77, 78 range and start to get comfortable. Hey, is that something we'd repair cosmetically or mechanically? Is that something that I want to work on or not? And then they can kind of find their happy spot of, oh, hey, my cutoff is actually 79. Hey, my cutoff is 82. It's fine, wherever your cutoff's going to be. But I don't think there's a universal one. I think so many dealers have different capacities in their recon to kind of set where that bar is for them.
Yeah, yeah. They know what their timelines look like for their intake of these used bikes and get them turned around. Okay, cool. Let's talk about metric cruisers. My friends here. Flat is the story. So metric cruisers have basically been flat year over year, down about 1%, but they actually ticked up 2.2% in May. How should a dealer be reading that specific segment? That is flat over year, but slightly positive. Is it stable? Is it going up, or is it just kind of a fluke?
It will come down. That 2% uptick is probably a little bit of a flash in the pan, and it's probably going to start following the curve like it should. In April, I would have said, "Hey, flat would be amazing." It's probably going to be down 1 or 2 points because historically, that is what it always does. It does. We have a 5-year average and a prior year average, and we look at what happened. And yeah, in that particular segment, we got a little flyer out there. But I would absolutely plan on that coming back down. In fact, it might even come down, uncomfortably, considering that, hey, it just went up 2 points. What do you mean it came down 8 points? Well, it would have to come down about 7 or 8 points to catch the seasonal averages. So it might come down that way. Maybe it'll only come down 5 points, but it will come down and follow the trend into August, where again, in the metric cruiser, very predictable. August, lowest point of the season, it will work its way towards that, and then it will start incrementally ticking back up.
In previous episodes, we talked about MX having a spike in previous months reports. Do you think, and you've kind of attributed it to the right kind of product showing up in this time frame? Do you think that's what was happening with the metric cruisers? You had a bunch of clean, Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, Kawasaki cruisers show up, and they just went for more of the money.
I think that so I think that on these, because this does capture more of the value minded customer than maybe the Harleys do, I think we could have seen some lift from the fuel prices, although it wasn't an overt conversation everywhere like we saw. What is it, 15 years ago, whatever. It wasn't overt. It was not an overt conversation, but they're happening out there. So I think we could have seen a little increased demand. That might be one of the factors. The fact that pre-owned is being a little more, stable and having more strength, and more dealers are getting involved, I think put it as well. And then product mix. But I haven't seen anything. Feedback from the team hasn't been like, holy smokes, we've had a lot of really good, cruisers. It's still been pretty much the same run of the mill stuff. I think those little incremental upticks are more driven by dealers finding that value proposition unit, which is what, a lot of people start off on a metric cruiser bike, low seat height, generally lower cost to entry, reliable, all those other good things for them. And I think that dealers are kind of capitalizing on that right now. But I think this is the last time we'll see it bump this way until we get past August.
Okay. Okay. Let's switch gears into sport bikes. Sport is always interesting in these numbers. The clean sport number in May was over $8,100, which is well above where it was in 2025. The April report said sport prices were softening as it leveled off from its peak spring value. So which is it, Mike? What are sport bikes doing? Are they softening? Are they strengthening? Are they staying flat?
They are bouncing around. When we look at the month over month, they are bouncing around. But they're not bouncing around crazy. We've seen the peak, and the peak was in that 8,000 ish average sale price, and we're still following the trend. Although we've had some peaks, if we were to smooth it all out, we're generally following the trend, and we will see them sort of again slide into August. The flyer with these is, as we already talked about, our favorite, example to beat on the Yamaha R6. If you have desirable bikes that nobody else has, then you will buck the seasonality trend because some people are just looking for certain bikes. If you are looking at the true average sport bikes, you're looking at your CBR 600s, your ZX6s, your R7s, R3s, any of that type of stuff that falls into the sport bike category that I'm going to kind of put in the, average, you will see a more average decline into August for sure. The bumps and the spikes on this are most likely issues with having, a few extra, rare Ducatis and some other things that I've known have come through that fall into this category. And so they absolutely elevate that average sale price.
Let me ask you a little bit more about what you still think about the velocity of the sport bike. You've said before that they move faster because dealers think that the book values often understate them, right? You mentioned the R6 can sell a couple grand more than a brand new one in its day. With the clean sport money this strong right now, is this still a buy signal or a sell signal for the dealer sitting on some clean sport inventory right now?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, that's highly market dependent, but I I I don't think there's such thing as a dealer of having too many sport bikes because they are such a draw for customers. They are for most of us in this industry. When they first started to become a thing, if we grew up seeing the original Hurricanes and things like that, that was one of the draws to being on two wheels. Like, holy smokes, that thing is just cool. It's fast. It's sleek. It's all these cool things, and I think that is still a driver for people through the doors. Hey, oh, you have one of these. You have one of those. I do think that they do draw eyeballs, and I think they do draw door swings. So, being in that inventory correctly is the definitely the headline to the conversation. Um, if you're holding on, if it's been on the floor more than 90 or 100 days, I would say that you may not be priced right in your market. And I would look at exchanging inventory in one way or another to find out what's not working there, or, wrong color, wrong make, wrong time of year, wrong whatever. Because most of the dealers I'm talking to are having very good success with sport bike retail right now.
Yeah, everyone that I know that follows that niche is crushing it right now.
Yeah.
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 Okay, let's move into off-road segments. So motocross, MX, ATV side by side. Specifically, the MX was up again 17.8% year over year in April, and the sequential number was 7.3. In May, the sequential cooled to 3.1. Still a positive number, but it is decelerating.
Yeah.
Is the dirt
Yeah.
bike run starting to wind down for the season? Again, it's maybe a topic of not getting enough clean stuff in. What's dirt bikes doing right now?
It's very I'm gonna repeat almost what I said, I think, last time verbatim, and I apologize ahead of time, but the dirt bike, the motocross bikes on the wholesale market, they are so dependent on the cleanliness of the individual units that are in the auction, and we see a range of them. We see stuff that literally looks like it was, slept outside every day in its life and never was on a side stand or anything else, laid over in the dirt, and that stuff comes through here, as well as stuff that comes out that, hey, that might have been a garage queen, but most of it, it carries a good number of nicks and scratches and occasionally oil weeps and leaks and seeks because they've been ridden. So when I see this product category fluctuate, I don't, only 3%. The product mix is going to be one of the biggest drivers here, and that product mix is what I mean is that it's like, hey, we could have had more or less, late model, nicer bikes that hold their values a little better. KTM is kind of, rebounded from, some of the negativity it experienced a while back. And so when we have clean KTM dirt bikes, those seem to be more desirable than some of the other ones. But also, I mean, clean Japanese bikes, if they're late model, they tend to do okay as well. So it's going to be product mix that's the biggest driver on the motocross price fluctuation and condition and quality.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
ATV. This one is still climbing. The all-terrain vehicle is the standout in the May data. While most of the segments were, again, flattened, ATV was up
Yeah.
5.5%,
Yeah.
the strongest mover of the core segments. What is driving the ATV right now, and why is everything else cooling down?
Uh, ATV is something that's finally kind of hitting its stride in the industry, and for us, I should say. Years ago, probably 5 years ago, we were standing around scratching our head, going, "Where are all the used side by sides? They have taken off. They're starting to outpace Harley-Davidson sales. If you could combine all the brands, all these other things, where are all these stinking side by sides?" I think we've reached a point where they've become so commonplace and so recognizable and so accessible that dealers are finding that there is a good opportunity, a better opportunity on the pre-owned than maybe they had realized. And especially here since, a year ago when they felt overstuffed with new product. Many of the dealers I talk to feel that they've got right-sized inventory as far as new goes, which means they have an opportunity to dive back into pre-owned and say, "Hey, yeah, I would like to have 5 or 10 pre-owned razors or whatever you want, on the floor here as an example or as something to get somebody in the door on." And so to see that climb, makes a lot of sense. The ATV season also varies depending on where and where in the country you're at, right? Where the data we're looking at is for the nationwide. And so it is a beautiful time of summer for people to get out and run ATVs in the trails in the Midwest and even the northern states right now. So they're in the peak of their market. So that also makes sense. Here in Southern California, side by sides, we're pretty much past desert season, that type of stuff. So they might be a little bit cooler, but the rest of the country is definitely in a position where side by side sales are doing well.
Yeah, and let's go by the numbers on the side by side. So they were up 11.5% year over year in April. May, sequentially, they dropped to plus 0.9%. That's a pretty big drop. The side by side is one of the best stories in use and has been for a while. You kind of named it in the Southwest. Maybe it's the desert season being over, but the rest of the country, what is it doing there?
They seem to be doing well. I was talking with a dealer last week who does new and used, and he had gosh, I think he had 9 or 10 units rolling out on a Saturday. I think about it just this last Saturday I talked to him, and he was over in the Midwest. He goes, "Yeah, I got 4 used and 5 new side by sides out today." And he said, People wanna play. People wanna jump in, and people are looking for the value proposition. Some people, hey, a new one makes sense for me." And he's got good pre-owned stuff. He's a good buyer of our late model clean pre-owns, and he's part of the reason that those values are somewhat stable. We always see, again, variation. I can tell you, much like motocross, the side by sides come in all sorts of conditioned states, and sometimes it feels like there's some cleaner ones. Other times we get some things in that are like, oof, that's a little on the rough side, and that can draw down those average sale prices as well.
I love that. And the utility versus the sport side by side, you talked about this a little bit previously over the last two auction cycles, the last 2 months of auctions. What are you seeing in terms of what's getting more through the auction? What are dealers wanting? What are they picking up more of?
The utilities are definitely in demand, and again, that's regional. The utilities don't do all that great in Southern California. Here at the San Diego auction, they do better in almost all the other auctions where there are more rural usable trails or farmers or opportunities to use that utility one. They are always stable and predictable. The cabbed out stuff that has HVAC systems and full doors, those things continue to do very, very well, on the wholesale market. Again, I don't have the book value in front of me on those, but we generally, trend above book, not to use that as the guide after kind of beating on it earlier. But, as that independent indicator on that side, yeah, they tend to, be pretty close on what those things are actually doing. Um, there's demand for it. And I mean, the new ones are definitely pricey. So used ones to be, thousands less, even if we're still talking about 20, sometimes $30,000, there's still a value proposition for dealers out there and for their ultimate retail consumers.
It is kind of crazy that this kind of caught on fire. This luxury deluxe version of the side by sides, cabbed out HVAC, 4 doors. The deluxes, the premiums, the Lone Stars, the North Stars. I mean, it's just kind of crazy how these things are 30, 40, $50,000 plus on the new side, and it sounds like they're continuing to hold a lot of value in the wholesale market as well.
They are, and I'm looking at one of my charts right now, and absolutely, but they're still following the trend, and they have much less of a seasonality S curve, where some of the on road stuff can vary, maybe 15 points from the highs and the lows. Typically, the side by sides vary less than 10, maybe even less than 8, without pulling out the actual data. Just looking at my charts the where it is, it's a more year-round stable piece of inventory and product on the wholesale side.
All right, all right. let's talk about the watercraft. So Marine PWC, Marine was almost up 25% year over year. It was one of the strongest segments in the market, most likely leading up to the watercraft season. But then the May numbers come out and it was minus 10.7%, the biggest drop of any segment. How do you kind of square that up to what's going on right now? Did all the dealers buy everything from you and there's nothing left to buy, or is it just kind of like a leftover stuff nobody wants?
It is the later, and I was trying to think of another way to not say it had to do with product mix and condition. So I'm like, so I thank you for saying it for me. The volume of watercraft coming through the auctions is very sporadic, and you're exactly right. The peak of the season really is that February, March, April, and that's exactly what we saw. So to see it drop is again unsurprising. It doesn't phase us. That's not out of the ordinary. In fact, the actual average selling price of those is again higher than the 5-year average, higher than last year's average, and in fact, just in May, the actual average selling price versus this year versus prior year actually matched up. So they are actually headed back towards their normal curve. We saw a uncharacteristic rise this year, well above the prior year averages. And so to see it come back and actually get back on its curve makes a lot of sense. And again, it will slide into August, September before they kind of stabilize and start, heading back the other direction as far as average sales price as we get back in towards January, February.
Yep. And just on a side note, PWC had a typical following of that same Marine. It went negative and minus 3% in May. So yeah, watercraft, we're kind of out of it right now for the wholesale until next season, right? Would that kind of be your best guess?
Yeah, and one of the things, yes, you got your all Marine versus PWC. Yeah, and that's exactly right. It's the seasonality is quick and strong, and then it fades back on when we look at all the Marine. But just with PWC, they made the correct adjustment. It's a little more stable. The bigger boats and the stuff that's selling for, $15, $25, $70,000, $100,000 wakeboard boats, stuff like that. When it's on, it's on, and then when it's off, it definitely goes the other direction, like it is right now, which is again very predictable.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right, man. So this part of the segment I always like to call "What should dealers do right now with this information?" Right. So let's get a little tactical. The 60-day turn warning. So April report said it plainly: dealers are carrying heavier pre-owned positions than in prior years, and the focus should be on quickly turning these units in 60 days. Now that we're in June, looking at May's numbers, what does the 60-day window look like right now?
So hopefully they're still carrying a good amount of inventory because I think the retail velocity is favorable. But as they start to see indicators in their market that things are not, that things may be slowing down faster than they were aware, then they need to make those adjustments on a week to week basis. Hopefully dealers are evaluating their inventory weekly, not monthly. This is the time of year where you really need to pay attention to what's aging, what's not ringing the phone, what is nobody written a contract on or tried to hang paper on. What is starting to get a little dust on it, and those are the ones where I would strongly encourage them to either aggressively market or mark down, or if it's time to wholesale it, let's wholesale it and make sure that thing goes away so you're not hanging on to it in September thinking coulda, woulda, shoulda. This is the time of year when there's a big, there's a big discrepancy between, hey man, retail sales are good, door swings are up, values are up. And so it feels a little weird to go, why would I get rid of something when I have, the peak of my market? And I don't disagree with that, but we are sort of past the peak of the wholesale. And so as we kind of fade away from, this peak retail and that's going to start to catch up with the depreciation that we're already seeing on the wholesale side, you got to find that balancing point. And I think that balancing point for a lot of dealers is June. I think making some hard decisions, in June about, hey, what inventory do I really want to hang on to? Or, hey, how much am I going to put into a trade? Do I really want to own this trade for, what I think I could sell it for today? Because that's not true. If you take in a trade today, by the time you get it reconned, everything else, if it's not back out on the floor within 5 days, you're already going to be into another season, and you could also be into book changes and things like that. So make good, strong decisions on what you're doing with trades today, and think about the value in 30, 60, 90 days, not today's value. That is one of the things there that I guess I'm trying to think of some ways to describe, or hopefully give some analogies to take with you guys. And that's today, especially this time of year, your trade should be thought of, what is this worth in 60 or 90 days, not what is it worth in a pretty good June market. Because if you say, hey, it's a June market, I'm putting all the money in this, it's going to be great, we're going to sell it eventually, and it doesn't, it will be a different market in 60 or 90 days. Might only be 5% off, but it could be 15% off depending on how things go this fall. That to me is probably the biggest thought. The most thought should be put into that. And that's where I do see a lot of sales managers or inventory managers or whoever runs that ship at a particular dealership. When we have those conversations and we look at stuff, 90 days in the future, August, September, someone sends us a list. I was like, hey, we got to get rid of these 15 bikes. When did you take it in? Oh, I took it in June. Well, you took it in for a lot of money. Well, the market was great. Okay. Well, that's a tale as old as time. I've seen this one a lot of times. I've already seen this. I know how it plays out. So try not to be that guy. Try to be value forward thinking, and try to retail them. I'm a big fan of that, but also realize if they don't, then it's a calculated risk that you've got to square up here before the season completely shuts off towards the end of summer.
That's such a great point, Mike. I mean, when you're taking in or facing a used bike right now, you got to think 3 or 4 months in advance. What is this going to be if I don't retail it? Obviously, the goal is to retail it as quickly as possible, but I would say half your inventory goes through that aging process. Let's just actually quickly go through your framework here, because you often bring this up in presentations that I see you in. It's in the report that you gave to me, but you bucket inventory ages in a 0 to 30, 60-day, 90-day, 120. And although I agree with you that they should be a shorter timeline, and then it's like, what am I going to do after 120? Should I let this thing go, wholesale it out? I would argue that most dealers say, this is probably a little too aggressive for my store, and they don't mind sitting on 120-day plus and maybe even rolling it over to the next season. Can you just kind of walk us through your framework and why you have it into these certain buckets?
Yes. The the simple answer is I had to make buckets somewhere. It's a little more complex than that though. Um, there I think there's a level of active inventory management, and the reason that I put these buckets together is almost to go extreme and basically go, look, here is one way to look at this. And most dealers I've ever talked with are not this aggressive. So I did kind of set a high bar for the idea that, hey, are you thinking about it at least are you part way down this path of going, well, maybe I'm going to look at it 0 to 60 and then 60 to 120, but I'm not going to look at it, in 30-day increments because that's just too much work, or I don't worry about it, or I just can't do that, or, for whatever the reason may be. So part of the premise was to put something out that was very aggressive and specific to try to, challenge dealers to create some kind of framework. Try to put a higher bar and see how high we can jump, right? So that was one of the driving factors with this. And the other driving factor with having a thought process of what are you doing with your inventory every 30 days is at a certain point, you do have to make a decision. At a certain point, you got to figure out what we're doing here. And carrying inventory into the next season costs money no matter how you look at it. If it doesn't cost you money, please call me. I would like to borrow $50,000 at 0% interest. I will probably pay you most of it back. If you're not cool with that, then why are you carrying hundreds of thousands of dollars of inventory into the next season that will probably pay you back, but there's no guarantee, and you're not even probably calculating the cost of money in the meantime, right? So that's the difficult financial dealer. I know there's inventory that makes sense. I know there's inventory that guys take in up in the northern states where it's like, hey, look, man, as soon as the temperature gets above 46 degrees in, February or March or April, I will sell every one of these bikes for, 25% more than I own them for, that I'm taking in September, August. I can't challenge that. That makes all the sense in the world. But if you're working off, less than 15% margins realistically on this, there's some math that should be done behind the scenes to go, hey, how many of these should I really keep? How many of these should go wholesale? And I should use that money and buy in the off season, probably get more selective, probably buy bikes I really like, fresh inventory nobody's ever seen before, all that type of stuff. So when we do hit the next peak of the season, I've got the inventory I want, not the inventory I had. So all of those things kind of swirl around the idea of being more actively engaged in managing that inventory and not just kind of letting the tide bring things in and out of the store and going, well, this is what we got. We're going to keep it or we're not going to keep it.
Yeah. And again, for all the dealers out there that are looking for a similar industry to base some of these rules on, this is kind of the norm in any automotive dealership. And we have a ton now of automotive dealerships that also own power sports stores, and they do apply some of these aggressive turn times to their power sports locations as well. And so it's not impossible. It's a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it. One thing that you also had on your information there was you had a calculation to the real cost of holding. And you said on a $10,000 unit, you are showing interest, advertising, maintenance, and overhead adding up to about $356 a month. And then you factor in the lost margin and opportunity cost, it climbs to $2,900 over 90 days. Maybe just kind of help me walk through that real quick,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the math I want to understand, and I don't think everybody else kind of calculates that into the total price.
Yeah, so this is and this is why this is a I'm going to call it a simplified theory of the automotive side, right? And the automotive guys are more aggressive in reality, right? No, at least here in Southern California, no new car store with a used car department holds anything longer than 60 days. It's 61 days, it's gone. Otherwise, the sales manager loses money every day until that car goes away. So they typically have a 60-day, and I don't think 60 days is realistic for our industry year round. Some of you dealers listening to this, you guys have 40-day turn times in season, but out of season, you might have 90-day turn times, right? So there is an average there. So keep that in mind. The premise of this math is, hey, you have a $10,000 investment sitting on your floor. You either own that outright because you used your own cash, or it's floored, or who knows, whatever it is, but there's some cost of money. And then there's also some cost of that thing living on your floor. It's not living on a free dirt lot somewhere. It's living under fluorescent lights. It's being wiped down. There's a security system. There's people that are around it. It's being advertised. It may need some bit of maintenance while it's there. Maybe the battery, maybe it's just as simple as a battery tender getting plugged into it. Maybe it smokes a battery. Maybe it develops a seal or a weep or something like that. But there's some cost of maintenance. That thing does not live rent free while it's sitting there. And then again, what's that footprint? It's taking up, I don't know, 8 square feet, 9, 10 square feet. What's your cost per square foot of your building? And so that's what this chart really does, is kind of break that down to think about it in those terms, going, hey, yeah, it's okay, I'll sell it eventually. Okay, well, what else would that 10 square feet of space done for you if you would have had a different motorcycle there? If you would have turned it 3 times in that same time period instead of 1 time, you would have made twice as much money, actually 3 times as much money, and you would have gotten 3 more customers, and all those types of things that add up, which is one of the biggest driving factors of the automotive side. Again, they have an advantage. They don't have the seasonality we have. Everybody needs a car, quote unquote. We are a choice, lifestyle, exciting industry, nothing anybody needs. But a lot of this math is worth looking at. If you're sitting in your dealership listening to this and you're going, hey, what does it cost me? What does a footprint of a motorcycle or a side by side, which probably takes up I don't know, 30, 40 square feet, what does that cost me to have sitting there? And what's its ROI? What's it going to pay me back versus what I'm paying to keep the lights on and open and close the doors every day? So that's the premise, is to kind of break it down into those thoughts, not just the simplified, I will sell it eventually. Oh, look, I made 18%. Well, you made 18%, but it took you 12 months. So did you really make 18%? No, you didn't. You actually might have lost 3% if you really attribute the correct cost to that bike.
It's a very true, but yet complicated way to look at the total cost of the retail side of it. So,
Yeah.
all this included now, I love that, by the way. All this included now, the answer is being disciplined, right? So, if you're looking at your aging, you're looking at your total cost of ownership on these bikes that you've got and you're trying to retail, what does the proactive pricing actually look like in practice? How does a dealer get ahead of the softening market or the seasonality switch, instead of just kind of chasing it down month over month and just, I'll discount it this, I'll discount it this. And what do they do? What's the answer?
So a couple of things. There's Knowing what's happening in your market is huge, right? I'll look to my friends here at Moto Hunt that have really good pricing models that can show you what your local market is doing. Similarly, on the NPA website, you can actually get a current wholesale evaluation on as many VIN numbers as you want in our system. There's a VIN value lookup. If you're not familiar with it, reach out to your local NPA person or me, and you can dump up to, I think it's limited at 500 VIN numbers, and you can do that every day if you want. And basically, we'll within minutes we'll spit back a list that says, hey, here's the current NPA value guide and all of this inventory if you were going to wholesale it. So if you have 5 bikes or 25 bikes or 45 bikes that are aging, and you're like, well, I don't feel like running every single one of them through value guide, you don't have to. You can actually just clip the VINs, pop them in that page, and you can watch that and monitor that as often as you want. That should be a monthly thing. You should be watching what the wholesale is doing to sort of drive what you do on the retail. Because if you have a asset that is the true value, which is the true wholesale value, right? If that's diminishing, well, then other people in your market could be catching up and buying that same inventory at the new diminished price, and they're going to undercut you every day of the week because, hey, we're all trying to make 10%, but my 10% is actually 5% less than your retail, so I'm going to win. So if you don't stay caught up on what the wholesale market is doing, you can get hung out and overpriced in your market because you're stuck with a margin that you got to make versus turning it quickly or getting out of the wrong ones and getting back into the bikes at the current wholesale values so that you can be competitive in the market. That's the biggest thing for me is just watch what your market's doing. There is so much variance across the country. Are you a motocross shop? Are you an on-road shop? Are you an off-road shop? Are you a side-by-side shop? Or are you an everything shop? Whatever that happens to be, that also dictates what your pricing should be. I've been in lots of shops that charge a premium because they're a premium location. They do a fantastic job of reconditioning. They put on a 90-day automatic service contract, whatever it happens to be, they can get a premium. And other shops are like, hey, listen, man, we're going to put a good, safe bike on the road and we're going to give you the best value proposition we can. No bells and whistles. We're just going to sell you a good bike. Okay. Those guys are a little more aggressive on the price side. So this is very customized to the listener. And I can't really dictate what should or shouldn't happen other than paying attention to your market, as well as the wholesale market in your area.
Let's talk about the exit strategy here. So, if retail is not holding up its side of it and they can't get out of it from a customer, what are some options right now that a dealer could use to exit one of these aged used bikes that they just got to get gone?
Yep. Hopefully they had a plan from the get-go. Hopefully they didn't wish it into retail and go, well, we got to put too much money in this on the trade. Maybe we can retail it. Number one thing I'll say is that dealers need to have a plan from day one. Hey, am I taking this bike in for wholesale? Am I taking this bike in for retail? If you're taking it in for wholesale it quickly. Check out NPA Direct Buy, send it off to the auction. Check our value guide. Call your NPA territory sales manager. Let's help you. Get rid of the wholesale when you know it's going to be wholesale it quick. Be done with it. Don't chase the market. And if it is a retail unit that just does not work for you, same thing. How much time are you going to give it? When it gets to whatever that point of inflection is, which hopefully is not more than 90 or 100 days, um, hit us up. Let's look at their NPA Direct Buy. If the market is favorable and you took it in right in the first place, even if it is 90 or 100 days old, you might be okay in the market. If you're close, but you think there's some more meat on the bone, then put it through consignment, right? Our Direct Buy guys will shoot you straight and give you a fair value, but we are taking a little out of it because we're going to take the risk. We're going to do all the legwork for you. If you're looking for that last dollar, then let's have you send it on consignment and let's get you that absolute last dollar. A little more effort on your side, but that's how you get that extra last dollar that it may have on the wholesale side. Those are the best options out there, so that you can exit from those units that may not have worked out for you. The last thing you want to do is hold on them for 6 or 12 months, and wish them into a customer. Odds are whoever you sell it to would have bought another bike from you, that you actually would have made money on, and you probably should have just chopped this thing off months ago rather than just feel good about eventually selling it.
Right, right. Hopes and dreams, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hope is not a plan.
Yep. Hope is not a plan. All right, let's take a look at the 30 to 60-day forward statement here. Where do you see price going? You've obviously got last year's data and the previous 20 years in front of you. You can see trends, you know what's
Yeah,
coming.
yeah.
Where are the prices going over the next 30 to 60 days across the major segments? And what is one thing a dealer should do based upon that information?
We are in the slide, right? This is always when prices tend to tick down, 2-3% a month, sometimes more. Way back when we started, we looked at the big discrepancy between the clean Harleys and the rough Harleys. We talked about how there can be a $4,000 spread for, basically the same, year, make, model group of Harleys, but these ones are clean, 78 and above CRs, under 25,000 miles versus rougher, 25,000 miles and higher on lower CR, and there can be a $4,000 spread there. Pay attention to the quality and the miles of the unit. That's going to be the biggest value driver. And the higher the miles, the more nicks and scratches, the more oil leaks, the more you need to peel back whatever you're putting back, whatever you're going to put into it on trade. That's going to save you a lot of heartache by understanding that the quality of that bike has way more to do with the value than whatever the book says. On the wholesale side, pay attention to that. On the retail side, some of these markets are doing surprisingly well. You guys all have to open up the door every day and see which way the wind's blowing. And are we going to have some more good weather patterns? We got some more sunshine. If you have that, I would continue to twist the grip on new retail sales as far into the season as you can, while paying attention to what are you going to do in 30, 60, 90 days. No matter what happens, we will see lower wholesale values in August, September. That just happens. There's no way around that. The COVID thing is not going to happen again, where we saw some crazy spikes or some crazy plateaus. We will absolutely this year see them, see the overall average prices just sort of slide into that August, September range, and they'll stabilize. And then we'll be talking about this again and then looking like, hey, guess what? Things are stable and going up into January again. So not very scientific, but it's true. And it's just a mindset y'all need to have as you're going, hey, I'm taking it in today. If I still own it in 30, 60, 90 days, I know it's going to be worth less. If you're good with that and you take it in appropriately, you should be great.
Continue to twist the grip.
Yep.
All right. Well, everybody, his name is Mike Murray. He is from the National Powersports Auctions. He's in there in lovely San Diego, California. The full NPA market report is available at the npaauctions.com website. Mike can be reached at mmurray@npauctions.com. As always, if you want help turning some used inventory faster, we've got the ultimate used playbook on dealers.motohunt.com. And on that note, we'll say bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by ZDMS. Okay, guys, physical inventory. Most dealers do it once a year. Some avoid it altogether. And honestly, who can blame them? Closing the store for days, paying staff to count parts, and still ending up with inaccurate data, it's a painful process that costs time and money. ZDMS changes that. With RFID physical inventory, 1 or 2 employees can complete a full store count in a single evening. No closing, no disruption, just pull the trigger on a handheld scanner and walk the floor. No line of sight required, no climbing shelves, no bending under counters, just fast, accurate counts feeding directly into your ZDMS system. And because it runs inside ZDMS's perpetual inventory system, your data is always current. That means better analytics, less obsolescence, and fewer lost sales. This is the technology powersports dealers needed, and ZDMS is the only DMS in the industry to build it. Talk to your ZDMS rep today, or to learn more, visit zdms.com/fixit.